everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me, as always, are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hey, Rob, it's me, Diana Perry Cruz. Hello.
And it's me, Jackie Not Perry Cruz McDonald.
Oh, wow. Well, we are here in the midst of this podcast recording, which is a podcast about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research. In just a moment, we're going to tell you about our topic. We're going to tell you about the research we'll be discussing. But for those who've been listening avidly through the month of July, you'll notice it is our special guest month. So every episode this month has a special guest joining us. I know sometimes we have other guests in other months too, but in July, it's nonstop guests. It's like oops, all guests. Just, it never ends. We're very, very excited to have a lot of guests. And we were talking about what we wanted to review. And we thought it had been a while since we'd done our kind of special series on collaboration in behavior analysis. And so we're going over, we've talked about collaboration with SLPs. We've talked about collaboration with OTs. And we thought, what would probably make sense, because we've been doing some episodes on working in schools and consultation in schools. It's July, so it's a good time for getting back in touch with, preparing for a new school year in a couple of weeks after the summer vacation. And so we thought, let's do one on collaborating with special education teachers. And I immediately said, well, then I'll be the special guest because I am a BCBA and a special education teacher. And Jackie and Diana said no, because people already have to listen to you talk. They don't want to listen to you answer and ask your own questions.
Truth. Very truth.
So instead I said, fine, then I will only pick a guest if that guest has pretty much the exact same qualifications for me and has worked in the field for exactly as long as I have. And we were very, very lucky in that there is such a person, and they are joining us tonight, whatever time we're recording this episode. And that is BCBA / special education teacher / preschool teacher, Carolyn Beaumier. Carolyn, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hi, Rob. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. And Carolyn, one of her bona fides is that she has been working in the field of behavior analysis and education for the exact same amount of time as me, because we were in the very same training class these years ago at the New England Center for Children. So we're very happy to have you on. It's been a long time. However long my career is, it's been that long since you've been on the podcast.
That's true. My career in ABA matches my friendship with you.
Yay. And so we're very, very happy to have you here to talk about collaborating with special education teachers, because while you are a BCBA, you primarily work as a special education teacher in a preschool, in a separate preschool classroom. But I know you collaborate with a lot of other teachers and special education teachers. So you have a lot of hats that you wear.
Yeah. What did you want to do first?
Teacher. I always wanted to be a teacher.
Oh.
Yeah. My parents were teachers.
And BCBA was just like side gig?
It was like bonus.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we're going to be talking about collaboration. Carol is going to be telling us from both sides what it's like to be a BCBA working with teachers, what it's like to be a teacher working with BCBAs, and what we should be doing better. And we already had a little talk before we started recording of I love when they talked about how BCBAs can be such a pain. So we'll be talking about how not to do that as BCBAs collaborating with others. Diana, what are the articles that we are going to be discussing today?
Okay, we have 3 articles to discuss today. They include Conceptualizing and Utilizing Board-Certified Behavior Analysts as Related Services Providers in Inclusion-Oriented Schools by Jean Greco, Pennington, and Walker, and that was published in Remedial and Special Education in 2023.
We know those author. I'm just kidding. I don't think we do.
We've heard many of them before and read their work before.
Maybe that's it. I only know them through their work.
Through their work, yes. Also, Navigating Collaboration, Factors Influencing Special Education Teachers' Relationships with BCBAs in Diverse School Contexts by Squires, Couture-Parega, Morris, Ellsworth Miller, and Hansen. That was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2024. And finally, School-Based Transdisciplinary Teaming to Maximize Behavioral Supports by Riley, Crowell, Thole, D'Angelo, and Young Savannah Bach. And that was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2025.
Ooh, so recent.
So fresh.
So for folks who haven't heard some of these collaboration episodes before, really the focus here is BCBAs must work with other providers. There are certainly times when we do not have to. And I think one of the problems with many BCBAs working with other people is we do get very used to being trained and working in really sub-separate ABA settings where we collaborate with nobody. We just do whatever we want all the time. I guess parents and students. I'm joking and being a bit hyperbolic there. But when BCBAs stretch their wings and fly to new locations, they tend to forget that they don't know everything and they need to work with others effectively. But that's not the same as just sort of assuming that whatever other professional is telling you is right and therefore you are wrong as a BCBA, because then you are not adding anything to the collaborative relationship. So this series is really about how do you thread that needle of being helpful, being able to be humble, but also being able to answer questions and provide your knowledge about behavior analysis to, solve whatever kind of situation is going on in that environment. So today we're focusing on working with special education teachers, which is where many BCBAs, when they're not working in, say, clinical settings, typically, a lot of them end up working in schools, doing a lot of different work, either with gen ed teachers or special education teachers. So, Carolyn, as our special education teacher / BCBA guest, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you came here? It sounds like teacher was number one. You sort of begrudgingly had to become a BCBA as well.
No, that's not true. Well, so I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. So I went through classes, which is what we were in together, to become a special education teacher, and then continued on taking classes to get my BCBA. So I do kind of identify as teacher first, but the BCBA aspect of my training, I think, just kind of lends itself so well. But it is really interesting to see how BCBAs work within my school and within the district, because it's a very different job and it's a very different kind of aspect that they're bringing in. So it's kind of interesting from my perspective, knowing that I could do that role, but I prefer to be in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to say, and I think I've told you this before, but as a teacher, it was always fun because we've been in grad school together. We were in trainings together. We worked directly together for many, many years. You always did a really great job. And one of the reasons I'm really glad you're here to talk on this subject, as to I knew that if I were telling you something behavior analytically, you probably knew it already. And we're able to sort of think about it from both perspectives. So I thought that was always really a great strength of you professionally, in that you could do both jobs, but sometimes it's nice to not do both jobs for a variety of reasons. Some of it is just being able to compartmentalize a little bit. Some of it probably being just there's not enough time to do all the things that need to happen in a classroom. So if someone else can help you with that, that's great. Hopefully they're helping you in ways that you would like them to help you. We'll talk about maybe that not always being the case sometimes. Not with me, of course, but like other people that aren't me.
No, I still miss working with you, Rob.
Well, here we are together. We're working together behind the microphones. That'll be fun. So one of the things that I think comes up a lot when we talk about BCBAs working in settings, the Jen Greco article gets at this a little bit, is sort of that idea of scope of competence in education. So for you, I imagine that was relatively easy in that you have a master's degree in severe special education, same as me. Then you became a BCBA. So you kind of understood how schools worked from the training perspective as well as from, your own kind of work and doing your practicum. But that's not going to be an option for every special education teacher. Sort of, have you seen other BCBAs, or when you're working with, 'cause I know you've done some supervision with BCBAs in the past, folks who want to work in schools, like, do you find that scope of competence is something that it really is a matter of you either went to grad school and you know what you're talking about or you don't? Are there other ways that, BCBAs can learn more about being in schools?
Well, I think one of the things that is important for BCBAs when they're working in schools is to really understand what the culture of the school is and kind of the setup of the school, which they do talk about in the articles. Because particularly in Massachusetts, every school district is different, and the way that they set up their special education is very different. And so you need to understand how that environment kind of exists that you're going into. And I think one of the things that is difficult about us being a school-based BCBA is you can be in a different school every day, which is part of the reason why it wasn't something that I wanted to do mainly. And so when you're spread out amongst different places and needing to kind of get to know that many different school cultures or that many different teachers' environments, that's really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I did like some of the things that were laid out in the articles that kind of addresses how BCBAs can be more effective despite the many locations they might be.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember which article it was now, but I know one of them mentioned another article. It might have been the Marks, but really talked about 6 websites that BCBAs should look at for education. And I have to be honest, I think I only knew 2 or 3 of those websites. So I went and looked up the rest. We don't have that. We're not talking about that article because it literally is just, here are 6 websites. We'll tell you what's in them. But
no, it had other content too. Was that not the Riley one?
No, there wasn't. They mentioned an article.
Oh,
that we're not
sorry.
Talking about, that literally is, here's 6 websites for BCBAs. It's like What Works Clearinghouse is one. I knew that one. I think Iris was another one they mentioned.
Oh, okay. Well, the Riley et al. Article does also have a list in there. It has good articles to review, websites to look at, and assessments, school assessments too. I thought it was a great table.
Oh. And like I know we
love
have
a sturdy table.
Yeah.
It's
a good table.
It's a tri-legged table. Yeah.
So I think there's like there's 2 parts. It seems to at least to me. And then Carolyn, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Some of it is as a BCBA, you do need to know
less Diana's.
This is the special educator episode.
I know. Jackie and I are just sitting pretty over
there,
here.
You know, don't butt in on our conversation. But we've got our knowledge of SPED law, so understanding how special education works. And I think Jan Greco, we can talk more about that. Sort of really goes into some of those great details. But then there's also, like you said, understanding the school you're in. Like if you're just like, I know all about IDEA, I know the letter of the law, you're missing out on some of those components. Like, how would you describe, if a BCBA came into your classroom, like what would you describe as like the culture they would need to be aware of?
Well, I think when you're going...
Yours would be the boss. You're like, I'm the boss.
Yeah, I do have a placard on my desk that says, killing it. So I think one of the things when you go into a school or a classroom is understanding how the services are provided and how support is provided. So is it very dense with one-to-one paraprofessionals? Is a lot of support provided in the general education setting? Is a lot of pullout happening? And so navigating kind of what already exists, I think is really important because you do need to tailor your suggestions to what is going to work and what is kind of within the realm of the school district, that the things that they're already kind of providing. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important to kind of know what exists and then also figure out how you're going to work with those providers. I too think one of the articles was really interesting when it was talking about BCBAs coming in and being the expert. Mm-hmm. And there definitely is that kind of tension sometimes, especially if you get into a kind of revolving door of new BCBAs all the time.
Mm-hmm. So just kind of to do a little table setting. This isn't really an article one. This is more just a practice question. Do you have some good memories of like BCBAs who came in and something about it clicked, like it worked really well? And then flip side, love to hear, do you have any stories of they came in and here's what they should not have done and they did it anyway?
I was going to say, is this the part where I talk about where you were my BCBA and
you don't have
all
to talk about me at all, doing all the right things. It's totally fine.
That's amazing. And you're like, I can imagine though, being a BCBA, maybe they don't know you're a BCBA and they come in thinking they know everything. That might be a little annoying.
I haven't experienced that necessarily, but I also I've been working in my classroom in my district long enough that I'm kind of the veteran at this point. And
you're only 20.
Yeah, I'm so youthful. So one of the things that I really enjoy working with BCBAs that I feel are adding a lot to my classroom is when they come in with ideas and come in with new things to try, because there's a lot of common problems, the common problem of, prompt dependence, or, I can't get them to receptively identify vocabulary, and, it's similar difficulties that we're having. And so when a BCBA comes in with a new idea or something to try, I remember it happened to be you. You had this article that had this great idea of putting in, tokens into a cup as token reinforcement. And then if there was an error that you might, remove them. And with this particular child, we tried it and it worked. And it was this really kind of aha moment of trying something different and exciting. And that's really what I love about working in the classroom, is that you're privy to those aha moments. And so when you're able to work with a BCBA that gives you new ideas to try, it's exciting. It's fun. So that's something that worked. That was a collaborative and effective experience. I think in my experience, things that weren't as successful is just sort of complacency, which can be anybody. But if you have a BCBA that just kind of goes through the motions, they're completing hours, but you don't really feel like you're getting much out of it, that's tough. And, I don't necessarily blame anyone for that. That every kind of person and professional goes through burnout or whatever. But when you're looking to get something out of that professional relationship and you're not, then it's just a bit frustrating.
That's a really good point, Carolyn, because a lot of the content that we read about, or certainly in these articles, really, I think, captures the positives a little bit more than, say, the negative you brought up, of a sense of, I think most people, when they talk about how are BCBAs failing educators, it's, well, they're coming in, they know better than the teacher, they're arrogant, and everyone wants them to leave as soon as possible. But they don't always talk about that reality of, like either burnout or it's like, oh, it's the same problem again. I don't want to come up with a good solution, or not I don't want to, but for whatever reason, I'm just not coming up with the solution or the information you're looking for. But that sense of complacency, or that sense of I have to be here and here's what I'm going to offer you. And is it stock solution versus an individualized solution?
I think it was the Squires article, but one of them mentioned that it was like a quote from one of the teachers that was saying, the BCBA came in with the same 3 suggestions. It was the same thing. Did you try this again? And that anybody can get stuck in a rut.
Yeah. Did you try a token economy?
Yeah.
I mean, the quotes in that article were like rough.
Yeah.
They were raw.
That's good. I think we should have to read quotes like that from folks when they're talking about the work we're doing, because we don't get better if we don't have to, if you can't sit and listen to it in the context of an article.
In that article, I know I just read it, but that's like a 2024, right?
Yeah.
And it's really highlighting many of the same concerns regarding social skills or lack thereof of strong bedside manner for BCBAs that the Taylor et al. What year is that, Jackie? 2019 article was. And I've been kind of hoping that we were going to get a follow-up on that. I know that was parents, right? And so this is slightly different, but not enough time, I guess, has passed yet where we see the needle moving on some of those soft skills. So,
But the other thing I was thinking about with the BCBA, the suggestions of how to be a better collaborator. As a BCBA, it talks about training. And you can get training as a BCBA, but I also think there's responsibility of a school district to provide training as well. And I've talked about this within my school, is the importance of mentorship. And basically every teacher, when you get hired by a district, you get assigned a mentor and you're working towards professional status. But I do think that if you're hired as a BCBA or another related service provider, that is still important to have. And I don't think that always consistently happens, because that mentorship would also help the BCBA understand the environment, the roles and responsibilities. You would be getting that information instead of having to constantly be seeking out and having these conversations with educators that are trying to give you feedback, whereas maybe a mentor could be giving you that information and the BCBAs would be more readily able to collaborate.
Now, have you found that improving over the years? Because I'm just trying to think of like districts, when we worked together, I didn't think as much of it because we were working together and we sort of knew what each other knew. In the district I'm in now, I've had a couple times where I've either had to do some level of like mentorship with someone, and either when I joined, but it was a BCBA who had the role that I had, and then I've mentored someone who came in and had the similar job that I had. Are there just more BCBAs in schools potentially here in Massachusetts that's actually like a really feasible suggestion to make? Because it feels like there was a time when it'd be like, hey, you're the BCBA in the district. The mentor is going to be like a 6th grade teacher. They're going to do their best, but man, they don't know what your job is necessarily, and you may not know enough to tell them what your job is because you don't know yourself.
Yeah, I think it's really inconsistent. I think in my experience, there's definitely more BCBAs getting jobs in school districts in Massachusetts. But even if you are 2 BCBAs across an entire district and you are doing mentorship virtually or something, it's still beneficial because they're going to be able to give you information about how the district works from their perspective and what role they are aware of that the BCBA would accomplish, because it is very different from school to school or district to district. So I do think it's an oversight. It's something that's missing if it's not always being consistently provided. And I can say in my district, it often gets forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd love to talk a little more about Squires, but for listeners, if you haven't had a chance to read the Squires article we're referring to, they have, I have to say, it was the longest description of what it was they were doing for something that in the end, I think I summed up in about one sentence. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it was
That'd be good, right? Since it was so long.
It was an open-ended, socially oriented methodology based on social constructivism, in which learners were constructing their own knowledge from interacting with others. Basically, they did focus groups on Zoom,
You just spend a lot of time writing a really good paragraph, and you're like, I'm not jettisoning this paragraph. I spent so long on it, and it's really well written.
You got to kill your darlings when it comes to editing your research.
And it was really well written, and reviewers kept it in there, and we got a very thorough description of the rationale behind the methods.
They did Zoom focus groups, is what they did.
Well, this is another qualitative analysis, which we've gotten several
all over the place these days.
Lately. Yeah, it's kind of exciting, though. I feel like many of the past 10 episodes, I feel like half of them have included like qualitative analysis in some format or another.
Right. And I was just on a dissertation committee that was qualitative in nature, and I actually knew questions to ask.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I felt really smart about it. I was like, I think I just read this article, and step 4, you didn't do this. And they're like, oh, yeah.
Did you ask them about data saturation?
We did.
Yeah. So that's something that if our listeners have listened to recent past episodes, we're revisiting the qualitative analysis aspect.
Yeah. Well, but again, the groups were different special educators. I love they were different types of special educators. It wasn't just one, like here's a mishmash of them, from different groups, from like preschool, early elementary, later elementary, middle school, high school. And you had to have worked with a BCBA. You had to work at different levels of special education from mild, moderate to severe. And they were just small groups, and they'd sort of talk about open-ended interview questions about what was it like to work with a BCBA, and they kind of came up with some themes about, the context of working with them, how well did their interventions fit, what strengthened the relationship, and what were barriers that potentially weakened that relationship. And I mean, I think, Carolyn, one of the things that did come out in terms of if you want to read something positive, you want to start with your positive first, it was, like you said, somebody who knew about behavior came in and they potentially had some new ideas. And the teacher sounded very excited about that, which I think some folks might forget, in that a lot of times what we hear about is teachers don't want to hear from BCBAs. And I think it's less about they don't want to hear from a BCBA who has specific knowledge, but you potentially started with the wrong foot forward. You didn't start with like, what is the problem? And I have some fun new ideas that you're excited to hear about. You probably started with, I know the answer to the problem you have, which is not as much fun to have thrown in your face because you're probably not enjoying the idea you can't solve the problem yourself. Carol, were there like barriers that like spoke to you sort of with your teacher hat on of like, yes, this is something that I agree with. I would have answered the question exactly the same, or ones that were different perhaps?
Well, some of the things that resonated with me was if particularly if it's a BCBA who's not always in the school. So if they're in multiple schools, which happens, that they're not going to always be available to see the problem. So they're going to have to rely on reporting of what's happening, what the issues are, maybe what might be leading up to it. And then they're going to give their feedback. But if the feedback isn't realistic, if the feedback isn't something that maybe the teacher has buy-in on or feels comfortable implementing, or if it would really require additional adult support, but the paraprofessional staff maybe doesn't have training or doesn't have responsibilities where they need to do XYZ, those are considerable challenges. And when you're coming in as a BCBA and you maybe don't know all of those, your recommendation, you want to offer help. So it's well intentioned and you want to give ideas, but if it's not something that's going to be actually feasible, then it ends up just being more frustrating.
Mm-hmm. I know another thing that had jumped out at me was just the idea of teachers being uncomfortable asking for help, which I know is something that I've seen a lot in my own career of teachers just, they're frustrated they can't solve the problem themselves. And I think there's been more efforts to set up better collaborative systems over the past, maybe 10 years or so. So I do think teachers are starting to understand they just can't do it all, especially teachers who've been doing this a long time. There was a sense of either the students who needed the most help might have been in a sub-separate classroom, so the teachers didn't have to know how to work and support those students. But I think more teachers are just getting comfortable just naturally with the idea of, I don't know how to do all the things that every student needs in the environment. I think post-COVID, especially too, just how many needs there are. But I know that's always, it seems like a barrier. And I think there's nothing worse than coming into someone who maybe is feeling just like they're coming at it from a low point of, I need help with this.
So I think we should also just caveat that this is probably specific to Massachusetts and other states that have the level of BCBA support in the public schools as we do here, because a lot of states, this would be completely foreign to the BCBAs who are working really outside of the public school setting. The two aren't married in the way that they are up here. But in Massachusetts, we have a lot of opportunity to have BCBAs support in the school systems and be employed by the school systems for those purposes. So that's pretty unique, I think. I believe it was in the Squire's article too, where one of the quotes was like so diplomatically stated, which was, the BCBA just does a wonderful job of championing the individual, right? But they don't necessarily have the perspective needed to know how to support someone within an entire classroom. And the suggestions can be really unfeasible, like you said, Carolyn. So that just really stood out to me. I was like, what a nice way to say that you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, here's a quote I
we
wrote
do
down.
know what we talk
I liked.
about, but it's only from the background that we have, which is absolutely individualized approach. Sorry, Rob. Go.
Oh, no. This quote, the BCBA is like, we have all the answers for you, poor uninformed plebes. They are just a person who has a different skill set than me. The BCBA is not Superman.
Yeah.
Was a common theme, and those were direct quotes from that article.
Well, the other thing that, actually, it's a different article. I don't want to jump around.
You can jump
Yeah,
around.
if you have something from another article, go for it.
Okay, well, so it was the article, I think it was Jan Greco, where it talked about BCBAs as related service providers, because I think the role that a BCBA plays is, it's helpful when it's clear to the people that work in the school, because a lot of times the BCBAs are coming in and they're seen as administrative. So if they give a suggestion, it feels like a must do and maybe not just a helpful suggestion.
Yeah.
And I also think that when that feels like a hierarchy, the person that's giving you suggestions, it doesn't feel as collaborative. So it never occurred to me to see a BCBA as a related service provider, like an occupational therapist or a speech language pathologist. And it just sort of like, I don't know, turned a light bulb on of like, oh yes, they can be another member of the team providing other perspectives on what might be helpful, as opposed to what it often seems as a BCBA is coming in as a pseudo administrator and giving their dictate.
Yeah.
Hi, do you want to be a BCBA, also known as a board certified behavior analyst?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Massachusetts to get your graduate degree, just minutes outside of Boston.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education, dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years.
And our 2022 graduates had a 92% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy approved fieldwork placements, ethics mini handbooks, PhD levels professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland if interested.
And don't forget, our program is accredited by the Association of Behavior Analysis International, or ABAI, as a Tier 1 master's degree program.
Don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu.
regiscollege.edu.
One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there.
Bye.
Sorry, everyone. I need to pause our conversation for 1 second to give you our first secret code word. In case you didn't know, ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved. And by listening, you're able to earn 1 learning credit. All you need to do is finish listening, then go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, or click the link in your podcast player and enter in some key information, including some secret code words. And these are secret code words from our special guest. And the first of those code words is rainbow. RAINBOW. Whether you're somewhere over that rainbow or whether you're hugging your old Rainbow Bright doll from the 80s, rainbow is your code word. Rainbow. Okay, enough code words. Let's get back to our discussion. When you've been working with your educational teams, is there typically a thought as to how does the BCBA play in? I mean, I know you've worked for many, many years in sub-separate, like ABA-focused programs, so it's almost a foregone conclusion. And the BCBA will be there because it's an ABA program. But I know that you worked in a couple different environments, and even in your current role, you've done your own kind of consulting, either professionally or just as a mentor to others. Is there like more thought than that you see go into some of those team decisions of here's what the BCBA's job is, here's how there were related service products? I know reading that Jan Greco article, even having been in that role, been in those meetings for years and years, I still found a couple really good points of, oh yeah, I don't think it really was determined why the BCBA. Someone just said BCBA and everyone said, that sounds like a useful thing we should add on to this IEP. It's got to make everything better.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's interesting, because I work in a preschool and we do a lot of intake evaluations. And so you have a child that you don't necessarily know, and you have to identify what team members are going to be involved in the arena evaluation. So you have to have some sort of metric of when are you calling in the BCBA to observe or maybe do an assessment. And so that sometimes looks like, do they have some level of behavior that's been exhibited or reported at daycare or wherever? Do they have a diagnosis? Are they receiving early intervention? So there's some like kind of things you can check off of why you would have a BCBA involved. But if you're working in a school setting with children that are also already there, and maybe they're receiving special education and maybe they're not, you might have a student support team or some sort of intervention team that you might assemble in order to...
Like the Avengers.
Yes. It's very important and magical what we do as special educators. So if you're going to have a team that's going to talk about Johnny's having difficulties in class, and let's talk about what are some things we could do, it's another question of when do you get the BCBA involved? Is it only if they're having behaviors and that's when you have to have a behavior analyst there? Or are there other, reasons that might kind of check that box? Mm-hmm. And typically what's been nice in my school is that whenever we're having a student support team assemble, then the BCBA is always going to be there, and they're just able to give their perspective for any student that might receive an SST meeting. Mm-hmm.
I know the district I'm in now has really been doing a lot to sort of try to get those collaborative teams together earlier on in the process, which on the one hand has been super helpful as to if everyone's already collaborating on like, hey, we're all identifying this student as having a problem, let's all bring what we know to the table. I felt it to be very collaborative. And then if the decision is made, you know what, this is requiring a higher level of care. Okay, well, I know exactly what my role is going to be because I've already been sort of collaborating. We've already talked about these challenges. However, I do also have the concern, maybe it's a me problem and not a BCBA field problem of is this just now one more setting in which I'm like, everyone, shut up, please. I'm the BCBA on the team. Let me tell you all the answers you need to be doing so I don't have to do more work than this. And if you do what I say, that will never happen. So I've been trying to be very aware of that as, I'm so thankful I'm here, everybody. Let me sit back and just listen first and talk. But that's not a skill that anyone ever told me when I was learning to be a BCBA. They told me, here's how you do case conceptualization. Here are the treatments that are definitely going to work because research says so. And I started out my career with, hey, everybody, here's what's going to work because research says so. And I'm very, very smart. I'm in my mid-20s. Therefore, I must know all the answers by now. So I'm sort of curious of your own journey because, like we said at the top, we've been doing this for the exact same amount of time. For me, it was like, well, I started a podcast and I have to read about this stuff all the time and I don't want to be a big hypocrite in the field. And I've worked with a lot of like great colleagues that were able to give me feedback that I didn't take personally when I was younger and might have taken it personally because they were people I knew very well. But that's not going to be everyone's case because not everyone's going to start a podcast where they're reading research every week. Not everyone's going to be working with like close friends that they can count on to give them that support. Maybe they have a mentor they're still working with, from their graduate school days. But I mean, what sort of ways have you, is it through seeing other people kind of bite it in terms of being collaborative in meetings? Has it been sort of just your own professional development on the teacher side to sort of reflect on what you don't like from BCBAs? Like, how have you sort of been able to get that Zen state? I got to be honest, you have a very Zen state when you are collaborating. Like, how have you gotten to that point?
Well, thanks. I think it's getting to know different personalities and maybe reading people and what might work with them. Because there is going to be a teacher that no matter how nicely you enter into a collaborative relationship, they are always going to feel less than you or feel like you're imposing somehow. And, those kind of preconceived notions may have nothing to do with your behavior at all. And so I do think it's very important to kind of just get to know a person a little bit, which is difficult if you're a BCBA just kind of coming in and being expected to know everything about a school, a district, and people's personalities on an individual basis. But I think it helps hugely because if you actually have a good working relationship with people in general, then your recommendations are going to be more effective. They're going to be more helpful. And you can kind of see them, maybe certain people that are more reluctant or resistant, taking your suggestions and actually kind of seeing some success there. Mm. But Rob, I'm curious for you, knowing that you kind of come in with a lot of amazing ideas.
Oh, thank you.
Are there any things that you took away from the articles about things that maybe you had to change or dial back or alter in your BCBA role?
Carolyn, flip the script.
So first of all, I'm the host. I ask the questions here. You're our guest. You just sit and answer.
Oh, sorry.
No. I think I've been very fortunate in the past year and a half, kind of leading up to, this, not knowing we were leading up to this recording necessarily that far back, but I really...
Everything culminating in this moment.
It's more like a Slumdog Millionaire moment of like, all these moments have led up to me winning $1 million. So a lot of it has been thinking about, I think starting with one of our book clubs, we talked about a book called Crucial Conversations, which is the idea that most of the conversations we have are ones that are very, high emotion and we weren't really ready for them, which of course spells out, I'm going to be a jerk in this conversation. And when someone else is raising their voice or getting upset, rather than taking a moment to reflect on why that might be, I'll just assume they're horrible people that I must beat in an argument, which doesn't result in collaboration. Step one in collaboration, don't be yelling at the other person. It's really hard, kind of precludes any collaboration. So starting from there, and then I've been doing a lot more looking into some of the work on motivational interviewing. So how do you work with people? Because I think we're so used to that phrase buy-in. How do we get teachers to buy in? And there's this implicit bias I think we bring to that conversation as BCBAs of, we got to get buy-in, which implies we know what's best. And if the other person isn't doing it right, it's our job to convince them how dumb they are so that they will listen to us. And I know I think almost every one of us would say, of course, that's not what I'm doing when I'm trying to get buy-in.
No, that's exactly what
But if you really think about it, that's what you are doing.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's why
Also,
you shouldn't use
There's
buy-in.
a great article.
I may have used the word buy-in earlier in this.
But you
That's
didn't
okay.
mean it in that way.
That's okay. There's a great article by Miller and Elia Rosales in 2024, I believe, that reviews this in detail.
So, and you know what? I'll be honest. It probably was from Rosales that I got that concept. That's just me. You know, it's like I said, it's all coming together. So that idea, it's less about I need to convince everyone that I am right and my answer is right, and more about like what you were talking about when we read about in the articles, specifically the Squire's article and their focus groups, on that idea of I need to figure out what the problem is. I need to make sure that the individuals I'm working with are in a point where they are ready to hear potential solutions to the problem. And then it's not me telling them, here's what I know and here's what you're going to do. It's me understanding what they'd like to learn about and then sharing what I have, which to be honest is what I prefer to do anyway. I'm excited about the science of human behavior. I want everyone to be excited about it. But you're probably not excited about learning something new when you're in the middle of a crisis. You know, a student has been, destroying a classroom or biting their friends for the past month. They probably don't want me to come in and be like, I'm so excited to tell you about differential reinforcement. Like, get the hell out of my room, dude. I'm very busy.
Wait, would you consider yourself a BCBA over a spec teacher?
In my current role, yes, I am
But
100%.
in your life?
I have really...
Caroline's she's got the sped shirt on with the BCBA pin.
She's wearing the hat.
Oh, the hat.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. The hat is a special educator hat.
Yeah,
I'm seeing it
special
now.
educator hat.
It says it right on the front.
And
So
then
if
there's a
there's-
tiny pin with the BCBA. But so are you a BCBA pin or are you BCBA hat?
I'm probably BCBA hat
I see that.
more often. However, I have also tried to, go back to my roots as a special education teacher a lot more in the past year or two, because I think when you think about what it's like to be a teacher, you behavior analyze a lot differently than when you just come in as someone who's like, I know about the science of behavior. I know what the research says on this. Here are the best classroom management procedures. Like you said, Carolyn, there's a context that if you are not thinking of, you are coming up
How tired
with...
those teachers are.
Amen, girl.
Teachers are tired. They're doing a million things. And they, on the one hand, they don't want you to be Superman, but you sort of have to be a little bit of a Superman without them knowing that's exactly what you're doing. Because if you come in and solve the problem, there's going to be some resentfulness, or you're going to create a treatment plan that only works because you did it. I see that a lot in consultation articles. None of the ones we read for this episode, but a lot in consultation, really looking at the idea of, well, the BCBA, you got to come in, you got to come up with a plan, you got to run the plan, then you'll do generalization. And I feel like when you come into any situation with an idea of, I'll solve it, then I'll tell everyone else what I did and they'll do it. You've already like halfway failed the client and failed the stakeholders, because you're coming in to do something you know how to do with no plan of how are you going to get anyone else to do it, rather than first asking, would this even be feasible? Because it's great if you can come up with some sort of continuous reinforcement plan to decrease, challenging behavior, or do like a skills-based training program. But if no one's going to implement that the second you're gone, you're wasting everyone's time.
It's true. One of the articles talked about how important it is to empower the people that are in the room so that the change can take place regardless of whether the BCBA is there or not. And that's really important. There was a quote, I can't remember which one, but it was basically like, well, can't the BCBA just do it? Like you just come in and you do it. You fix it. You're like, that's your job. But it's not really. The BCBA is coming in to give a suggestion or a plan or some sort of procedure that ideally would be happening without them actually in the room, that they've trained, they've done the training, there's assurances of fidelity, and that the people that are in the room are able to see it through.
One thing I want to go back a little bit to Jen Greco. We were talking about related service and necessity. And certainly necessity of BCBA support is going to have a lot of different factors that go into it, whether services already exist, whether this is an educational barrier, challenging behavior barrier, or is it more of a skill acquisition, in which case maybe the BCBA is not the number one person to go in, even though many of us would say, of course we are. We know all about skill acquisition programming, but perhaps not in the ways that the school system would like. But I know there are times, and some of this is, I'd just love to hear your opinion on that, when BCBAs just kind of get added. It's like a school that's just sort of a shotgun approach. But all the providers are now related service providers because this student has a lot of needs. Therefore, everyone's got to do stuff now. but then sometimes the IEP itself doesn't reflect in the objectives and goals. Here's how everyone is coming together to produce better education for the student versus, well, they'll all figure it out. They're smart people. I feel that does put teachers in that role of, well, now I've got 1 million people who are like unsure what they're supposed to do to help this student in my context, which is the classroom, or they're doing everything outside of the classroom and assuming that it will magically result in, and then everything else in the classroom just happens to go better now because they are doing something 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week somewhere else, not in this setting. How is a teacher, A, have you been in that situation before? And then B, how would you suggest that either whether it's the teacher advocacy or the team or the BCBA advocacy resolve that situation so it becomes something useful? Because I think that might be where you get your like burnout BCBA of like, listen, I don't know why I'm here, man. I got to fill an hour a week. You seem fine, or I don't know what I'm doing. And that could be really frustrating for the teacher as well. We think about it, it's frustrating for ourselves, but you brought up the good point. If that's frustrating for the teacher of all these people like milling about telling you to do stuff or not telling you to do stuff and sort of just resulting in nothing.
Yeah. So one of the things that it talked about was important is establishing what the role of a BCBA is, because it can be very different. Like, no, your role is only to come in and look at behavior and that's all we care about, versus building skills or fading support. And one way that you can identify within a district how they, quantify the role of a BCBA is by their presence in an IEP. So, and the same is true for related service providers. So the John Greco article talked about how collaboration in a team would be represented in an IEP. So one example is in the service delivery. So if you have, your different periods of time for pullout versus periods of time when you're pushing into the classroom for the speech or for OT, and also where the BCBA is there on the service delivery grid. So if it's in the consult only and what level of consult that looks like. But I think it's also really interesting to see how different districts do goal areas, because you can have, and what the article supported was having the goals be collaborative. So yeah. So every the skill areas that you're working on might be, goal area 1, 2, 3, but a speech therapist or a speech language pathologist is going to also be involved in 1, 2, 3. A BCBA is also going to be involved in 1, 2, 3. And a lot of districts don't do it that way. Mm-hmm. And what they do, which I think is easier, is the speech language pathologist is responsible for goal area 1. And goal area 2 is just the occupational therapist. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that they don't collaborate and they don't consult, but it does lend itself to less collaboration and less working together on what the skills are that the child needs. And I think particularly where does the BCBA become involved? Oh, the BCBA is only consulting on goal area 3, which happens to include a behavior reduction objective or something like that. Yep. And to me, it does become very fragmented, and it's representative of, you only see a BCBA as making sure that, those loud outbursts really need to be reduced. And that's all you're here for. And it's a little bit frustrating as the special education teacher, because you're the case manager. You're really responsible kind of for all of it. Not necessarily responsible, but you're managing all of it.
You're touching all of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oversight role that you kind of end up serving.
Yeah. And so I do think that school districts kind of go the way of having it be more segmented because it's maybe easier that way. And consultation is not easy. You have to have time for it, and nobody ever seems to have enough time. So it becomes easier just to have people have their little narrow things that they're responsible for. But I think it is at the expense of maybe a more cohesive and effective support plan and program for the child. And so, that's it's just interesting seeing it reflected in black and white in an IEP.
Yeah.
That John Greco article is really good. I feel like it had like the overview of, so you're a school BCBA. right? It's like if you suddenly find yourself in this role and you don't perhaps have the background for it.
I woke up today and I was a school BCBA.
This is a great article. It could be another Freaky Friday situation like we've discussed before, but it could also just be that that's the job that you got and you don't maybe have that much background in it. It is a great article to help you answer some of the questions about the structure and the varying roles that are present in a school setting that perhaps you didn't know you needed to ask. So
Yeah, and I got this article and I was reading it and I immediately wanted to share it with my BCBA, not as like you really need to read this, girl, but because she happens to be relatively new to our district. She's worked in our district just for 1 year, and it's been a wonderful working relationship this year. For me,
Hope she's listening.
I know. It's been great working with her, but knowing that she is new to the district, we've talked about some of the difficulties of her not knowing how it works in our school or our district. So I thought I wanted to kind of slide it on her desk and talk about it later.
Right. Can I ask a question?
I have one too.
I guess.
We're just, we're sharing all the different hats.
I mean, I let Carolyn do it because she's our special guest. I don't want to be rude. I mean, I guess everyone can ask questions now.
No, I won't. I'm going to save my question for dissemination station unless we're rolling in.
No, I don't think we're quite rolling in yet. We're getting there, though.
Okay.
I have a question because it's directly related to what she said. Does it bother you when specialty services pull into your classroom or push in?
Not at all. But I'm saying that because I am a teacher of a substantially separate classroom. So if they're pushing in, they're not really because they're pushing into another kind of separate setting.
That makes sense.
But one thing that they've struggled with is sometimes you'll have these kind of overarching movements or suggestions coming down from central office.
That's what
Exactly. Where they're like, you need to do all of your supports in the classroom because that is the best place to do it. And they're like, yes, except we're working on articulation and that is not the best place to work on rapid fire, drilling of sounds and mouth, manipulation. So I think it's difficult when you are dealing with ideas that are coming down as like a general guideline and that not always being what you find the most helpful.
So you mentioned the idea of the collaboration, like finding the time being such a huge barrier. And I know the Riley article, we haven't talked too much about that article, sort of looked at it's a bunch of E's, that you can do. Not E's in the sense of easy, but E in the sense of all of the suggestions start with the letter E.
No, yeah.
It's
extend.
It's extend, establish, Heinrich.
That's what I thought it said, but it's enrich.
Also known as enrich. Expand, exchange.
And we've hit upon a couple of these. So certainly these are sort of the ideas to build on that collaboration. But certainly the idea of the expansion, you mentioned kind of from the Jan Greco, the idea of we need to make goals that everyone has decided we're all going to work on these, because you can't make transdisciplinary goals if everyone says, I have a goal I want to work on, I'll go do it over here. By definition, you are no longer a transdisciplinary collaborator. You're not even a collaborator at that point. You're somebody doing stuff. I don't even know if you consider yourself a service provider quite the same way. I guess you could, but I would not consider you a very effective service provider. Exchange, we're talking a lot about exchange, giving feedback and working with other professionals as a part of that. But I think one of the challenges that I know jumped out at me was really the kind of the creating team expectations. And the ones they list in the article, I found, talking about, hey, let me talk about my ethics. Hey, let's not use jargon. There was something, I don't think it was meant by the authors to take this tone, but it almost felt like a tone of like, everyone, let's sit down. I'm the BCBA. I'm going to tell us how we're going to be collaborative by explaining things that I've read in my articles about how BCBAs aren't collaborative. I'm going to model that for you, and then you'll do the same. There almost seemed to be a sense of, by collaborating this way, is the BCBA not being humble? They're sort of bragging about, they're turning their weakness of, I'm not good at collaborating, almost into something they're now bragging about how bad they are at it. And they're going to tell everyone how they're supposed to do it better.
I did not get that feeling.
Okay,
I didn't get that.
There was
feeling.
something about like, I'm going to share my ethics code with everybody. I'm feeling it. I'm overly sensitive to it. Okay, so perhaps that is not a real problem. But if you are going to take some of these recommendations, make sure you do it in the context of, hey, everybody, I'd love for us to do this, or wouldn't it be great if we did this, or are you interested in doing this together rather than lecturing? I'll go first. Let me explain about myself as a BCBA. Probably don't do that.
Well, I don't think I've been at a collaborative meeting where we've all gone around and shared our code of ethics.
But a slumber party, yes.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just BCBAs do that. But one thing that it talked about and I highlighted it, is positive first encounters foster candid conversations and willing collaboration, positively impacting outcomes. So just to say that when you have positive interactions, positive relationships, when you're getting to know people, and therefore you're building it a little bit on a more solid ground. And I think that happens naturally. It doesn't always happen we're sitting down and we're all staring at each other as members of the team, and we're going to, talk about how we're going to, make the most progress with this child.
But that goes back to another point you made of how many BCBAs don't have that time. If they're in lots of buildings, they're not learning. And that came up a couple times in the article. But I know, Diana, you even mentioned like in Massachusetts, where it feels like, 1 out of every 5 people gets assigned to be a BCBA in a public school. We have so many of them here that you just aren't going to
wake up, you get an email, and you got to report to work.
You're not always going to have that time to build those meaningful relationships. But I know one of the things I've loved about working as an employee in the school district versus, say, an outside consultant or an outside contracted service provider is I can make that time. That kind of leads me to another question I had before we kind of move into the summary stuff. Working with outside BCBAs, how does that usually go? Because I am someone who you should be very excited to work with outside BCBAs because they know the jargon. You can skip the whole don't speak the jargon because they know the jargon. I sometimes find it to be very frustrating in terms of just folks coming in and doing all of the things we just talked about. Don't do that when you're collaborating with a teacher. And it's really hard for me to say how they would do a better job because they are definitely not going to be spending tons and tons of time in my setting or in my context or classroom because they're not going to get paid for that. Therefore, they just really can't do it. And they often come in with, here's what you need to do. It's best practice without actually feeling like they understand what a school is like. Again, is that another me problem? I feel like we're doing a lot of me problems today.
Well,
but
One thing that I have noticed is, so in our program, it's a substantially separate preschool classroom, and we do meetings with parents usually about every other month where we're reviewing progress. And we invite, if they have an outside service provider, we invite them to those virtual meetings. And since COVID, so many of my students have outside supports, which is wonderful. And so for the most part, they attend those meetings. So I've been at a meeting for a child where there are 3 BCBAs sitting in the meeting, which is wonderful.
Including yourself or in addition to you?
Including myself.
Oh, okay.
But
it's only the meeting.
no,
for BCBAs.
actually it was in addition.
Yeah.
It was,
wow.
yeah, it was a lot, but it was, wonderful for that child and that family. But it is interesting because then I'm sort of viewing it as I'm the child's special education teacher and case manager. I happen to have my BCBA. There's a BCBA who consults to my classroom, who's in the meeting. Then there's the BCBA that is coming from the child's home program. And then maybe they also have a consultant in addition to their home program. And so we're all talking about what we're working on, but it's very specific to our setting. So the things that I'm doing are different than what they're doing at home because they need to work on different targets. And so it's just been interesting to see, we all have the same training, but sometimes it's still a little funky.
Yeah.
I mean, it hasn't been bad. It's just been interesting to see, because you can even sit around with a bunch of BCBAs and be like, "Well, you did it that way."
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah.
And I think most of my experiences are like yours in that maybe we're talking about different targets based on setting, and everyone's just sort of, in some cases, those feel like we're just sharing. We were kind of sharing updates, but definitely had ones where it feels like people are trying to consult to me, but I didn't ask them to consult to me, and they're giving me suggestions.
Vice versa.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sure it's been vice versa. I'd like to say it's never been, but I'm sure it has been. And really that idea of, I think there's that challenge for BCBAs when we talk about collaboration. I think we focused a lot on collaboration. You are in a school. Your goal is to work in a school. You have some amount of training. You have a level of competence. But I do think there are a lot of BCBAs out there who are consulting not necessarily to schools, they're consulting to a family, or they've been hired to do home ABA, and they rightly would like to be seen as a member of the child's team because they are by the school system. However, it sometimes seems that folks can forget that's not necessarily their level of competence. So a lot of, I think, what we're talking about today is for folks who have already sort of gotten over that barrier of I have competence to work in a school. If you've only ever worked in a sub-separate ABA program, probably don't give a lot of recommendations to a teacher unless they're asking for them, I would think. Like if I'm thinking of just my time when I was still teaching a class, if someone came in and they're like, I've never been to school before, but I'm a BCBA and here's what I know. Certainly as a special education BCBA, I would be really unhappy about that conversation.
Well, and sometimes you're just trying to figure out how many cooks you need in the kitchen, because when we were sitting in this meeting, there was 4 BCBAs all commenting on the best way to work on toilet training and pooping in a toilet. So
It's one of my favorite activities.
yeah, I mean, it was helpful, but there was a lot of I don't want to say opinions, but there were a lot of suggestions. And so I was wondering from the parents' perspective, is this helpful or is this perhaps too many ideas that are being thrown out?
Right. And it's easy to slip into jargon as well when it's a bunch of professionals talking together, and that could be alienating for the family too.
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked about a lot of different areas of collaboration. So let's move into dissemination station. And we're going to sum it all up. We talked about a couple different areas. I think certainly the Squires article, if you work in schools as a BCBA, you owe it to yourself to read those comments, because some of them are going to possibly your first instinct is going to go, that's wrong. I've never done that before. But
you don't want to treat people like a bunch of plebes.
Exactly. We talked about, transdisciplinary collaboration. But Carolyn, I would say if you had to give maybe 2 pieces of advice as someone who's been doing special education for many, many years, you've been a BCBA for many, many years, but as a BCBA working, whether it's specifically with you in your context or general things that you've found to be good rules of thumb, what would be the ones that I think would be you would find the most helpful for, say, a new BCBA, someone who's just coming into the school system?
I think the John Greco article really spoke to me because it put a lot of emphasis on understanding the dynamics of the system that you're trying to help. And so the more you know about it, and whether you have to ask questions or just observe or dig in a little deeper, the more your suggestions are actually going to be helpful and feasible. So I feel like that was my number one.
Would you have different advice for someone who's maybe been in the field for a while, who maybe, they understand how schools are working, but maybe they want to up their just general collaboration game?
Well, I think it's really helpful for any working professional to have some self-reflection on, what is working, what isn't. And I think if you have maybe some examples from your own career of what didn't really work that well, and what role you might have played in that. And, are you not building enough bridges so that people are wanting to work with you and take your suggestions? Or are you not looking at the supports that are existing so to see if they'll really be helpful? I also think, going back to my comment about complacency, is that if you come in with the same suggestions all the time, then you're kind of giving the impression that it's just them that's the problem. It's them that aren't doing it. I'm coming in with this suggestion again. Are you going to be able to do it this time? So maybe just thinking a little bit more, I don't want to say outside the box, but just expanding what your toolkit is, or, what some ideas are. Because when you come in with ideas and you've been there a while, it's people aren't always interested in hearing the same things. And so it's exciting to kind of expand your own, your own practice, and other people kind of get excited about that with you. So.
Oh, that's a great one. I'm gonna reflect on that suggestion. I know there are a couple classroom-wide plans a lot. I do a lot of classroom-wide consulting. There's a couple that I just love. I just always want to like, you don't have that? Well, you should, because it's the best one, and research says, and I've done it, and it's a million times, and the kids love it. It's great. And that may or may not
Is it a levels program?
what?
Just
No.
kidding.
Levels. I don't even like hate levels programs, but no, I do not recommend levels programs. If you're like, I need a levels program for my general education setting, like I don't know, like what district
I'm
are
sorry.
you in?
I didn't mean to derail you.
That's an intense district. Your class of 25 kids, you need your levels program.
Okay.
So, but really thinking about it less as, here are my suggestions that I love so much, but going back to what is the context I'm in now? Because you may come up with the same answer as to this is the best solution. But if you thought about it from the context of, well, this is the classroom I'm in, this is the problem the teacher is asking about, this is the information that seems to gel most with them as an educator, you could give the exact same, oh, well, the answer is the good behavior game. That's a great answer. Yeah, and that is a good answer. But if it's coming from a place of the teacher explained, here are the challenges, and here are the things I like, and here are the things I don't like in my classroom, and your answer still comes out, your equation is still equals good behavior game, it may be the same thing over and over, but it will be effective because you're working with the teacher's needs and the classroom needs rather than, I know what's best for classrooms and it is, XYZ.
I also think that if you kind of dial into some things that teachers will get excited about or think like, yeah, that actually really worked, then the teachers will share those ideas with each other. A lot of common planning and consulting happens without a behavior analyst present. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that great, ideas that are rooted in ABA principles aren't already being shared. And so when you see a teacher, if they've implemented a practice in their classroom and it really worked and maybe it was something new, then they kind of share it with each other. And so, that'll happen even if you're not there.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
The organicness of, education existed before behavior analysis. Yeah. I can't believe it.
Great ideas without a BCBA around.
All right. Well, that brings us to...
Can I ask my question?
Yes, that's right, Diana. You've been holding it this whole time.
Yeah. So this episode is part of our professional collaboration series. And so for each of our other episodes, I think I have asked the guest, what would you want a BCBA to know that you very often find that perhaps BCBAs don't know? Because I think sometimes we can have the impression that we have completely overlapping backgrounds, histories, and education as special education teachers, and that's really not the case.
Well, we do.
You two do. I know, but not everyone.
That's unique.
Right, exactly. Not everyone does. So what do you wish people knew when they came in your classroom?
Well, that's kind of tricky because I have had my classroom for so long. And so it's funny, when a new BCBA comes in, whether they're a new BCBA or just new to our district, and they are like, those are the data sheets that you're using, but these are the data sheets I used in this town 10 minutes away. And have you seen these? And I'm going to give you all of these other things that are similar to what you're doing, but totally different. Uh-huh. And I'm laughing only because I remember sitting there being like, no, Carolyn, you can be open to new ideas. You can try maybe a different data sheet.
But then you're thinking, why?
But I'm also thinking, I want you to understand what we've been doing for the past 15 years. And then maybe we can decide the merits of yours and the merits of mine and come to a collaborative decision.
Sure.
I think that's the biggest help is when somebody comes in and they're just understanding what already exists there. And there could be things that could be improved for sure. There's always going to be things that could be enhanced or changed for the better. But if you just come in with a whole bunch of ideas, then I immediately get like my back kind of straightens and my neck kind of gets prickly.
Yeah, I feel like teachers are sort of the same as like folks in maybe the tech industry in terms of like every year someone's got a great new idea and that's the idea and we're all going to do it. And then a year later, they're like, we're doing a different new idea. Did you get good at the last one? So there's that kind of head in the sand of like, I'm just going to do the bare minimum of what I'm asked to do because to be honest, this is going to go away and I'll go back to doing exactly what I know how to do already. How can I do this with a minimum amount of jadedness, but also the reality of I don't have unlimited time to learn a new thing that may or may not still be here in another year.
But it's not just me. It's the paraprofessionals and the support staff that work in the classroom, because whatever data sheet or whatever system we use, by and large, they're the ones that are using it every single day.
Yeah.
And so you want, even if it's like a spreadsheet, sometimes you have people working in your classroom that hate spreadsheets. They hate typing.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. And of course I'm in an old school classroom that uses paper and pencil, which is hilarious because plenty of people only use iPads and they don't even sum their data because the software does it for them.
I think it's a lost art when you're just like, I put it in a computer and it tells me what to do. I'm like, well, I don't trust you, computer.
Exactly.
I don't want
That
AI
should be part
telling
of
me
the
what programs.
BCBA's job.
Yeah.
Is analyzing the data and making decisions based on the data.
Yeah, but the data being collected is often done by, the
I know.
support staff there. So you want them, you just don't want whiplash of
Right.
a new data sheet or a new system. And
It needs to work for everyone. Yes.
Yeah, and so kind of just taking a temperature of what's going on and how's it working for everybody, and are you interested in maybe some new ideas, and kind of just going in the shallow end of the water.
Well, very well said. So everybody out there, if you're collaborating with a special education teacher, you've got some good action steps, whether you're new to the job or you're an old hand, but maybe there's some more to learn.
Just jump in the deep end.
No,
That's great. That's chaos.
it's too cold. Well, actually, maybe it's a good idea if it's cold.
It's freezing. Everybody got wet on the side. They didn't want it.
This metaphor is getting away from
Yep.
us.
And then your
Summer
special
metaphor.
education hat just popped right off.
I know, and then you need to put on your IEP towel and your collaboration bathing cap. All right, let's move on to the last section of the show, pairings. Diana, take it away.
Oh my goodness. I was not expecting this.
Do you want to do pairings later?
However, I am ready.
Yeah, we don't usually do it with the guest here.
I know, but we're all here.
Okay. All right. It's time for pairings, everyone. Pairings is the part of the show where I tell you about past episodes in our library that you could go check out if you enjoyed this one and would like to learn more. We have several episodes where we talk either about schools, consultation with them, or that professional collaboration series that I referenced earlier. So you could check out the following. Episode 124, we talk about school consulting with Matt Chicoria of the Behavior Observations podcast. Episode 171, collaboration with speech language pathologists with Dr. Aaron Michaud. Episode 188, collaboration with occupational therapists with Dr. Michael Roberts. Episode 259, next level collaboration with Rose Griffin. She is an SLP. Episode 262, collaboration and leadership in the school setting with Dr. Bruce Tenor. Episode 277, consultation and behavior analysis. And finally, episode 302, the ethics of collaboration. I also like to recommend a snack to go with these episodes. The snack today is giant plate of cookies. Because Carolyn brought a giant plate of cookies
I already
when
ate
she
one.
came here
It's true.
today.
Modeling the behavior you want to start your consultation
That's
relationship
right.
with.
Exactly.
Full-on platter of cookies.
Exactly. Yes. So
Eat these cookies while you tell me about what's going on so I, as a BCBA, can help you.
We're learning about each other.
you guys nailed it. All right. That's pairings. Please enjoy.
All right. Thanks, Diana. And once again, thank you so much to Carolyn Beaumier for joining us today. It was a real treat to get you on the show and just hang and reminisce about the old days a little bit. Yeah. For all of you out there, we really hope you enjoyed ABA Inside Track. We'd appreciate it if you subscribed on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to get your podcasts. You can also find us online at abainsidetrack.com, where you can find links to all the articles we discussed, as well as to purchase CEs. And if you want to purchase CEs, don't forget your secret code words. And these are code words that Carolyn came up with. And our second code word is elementary, ELEMENTARY. Whether you're working in an elementary school or, yeah, you see, like you want.
I say elementary because there's an A in it.
Oh,
Elementary.
Okay.
Elementary school.
well, you'll spell it right if you say an elementary school, or you could be like, I'm Sherlock Holmes, elementary, dear Watson.
Is that what he sounded like?
Yeah, that's exactly what he
Oh
sounds
my
like.
goodness.
You didn't know? Mm-mm. Oh yeah, watch the movie. Elementary is our last secret code word. If you have not done so, we'd really appreciate it if you left us a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also support us by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, where you can get all of our episodes a week ahead of time. When you subscribe, you can also get access to all of our polls, as well as free CEs for our listener choice monthly episodes voted on by you, the listener. And also at the $10 and up level, you can get access to our book club episodes as soon as they get out in 2 CEs for free for listening. We've just finished our poll, so by this time you'll be able to know what our next book is. But the last book we did was
The Body Keeps the Score?
It was The Body Keeps the Score on trauma care. We had a lot to say about that book.
We broke Rob there for a second.
I've been looking at a lot of book club polls, and I forgot what we actually just did. It was The Body Keeps the Score. So if you want to get that right now, go to patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. And some final thanks, in addition to thanks to Carolyn, big thanks to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro, outro music, Kyle Sturry for recording our interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode, but until then, keep responding. Bye!
Bye.
Bye.